Hello, everybody. It's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course, I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. Now, March is National Women's History Month, and last week we kicked things off with two fantastic films all about women in the performing arts. This week, we're going to shift our focus to two even more phenomenal films all about women in the business world. Now, one of these films focuses on a fictional woman's struggle to exit blue-collar Staten life existence and compete in a world dominated by privilege and dubious moral ethics, which of course is the high finance sector. And the other film follows the true life journey of a woman who's on the brink of financial ruin. And it's all about her struggle to take care of herself and her family. So, as always, these two titles are available entirely for free with the use of your Milan-Berlin library card. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into the Rex. Okay, my first film is available via our CleveNet service, and that is 1988's Working Girl. So, Working Girl was one of those movies that was really popular both with critics and with mass audiences. It was nominated for 6 Academy Awards. It won the award for Best Song, but it had tons of accolades for performance as well. It's from Mike Nichols, and it's a romantic comedy centering on a woman named Tess McGill. She is an ambitious secretary who's worked her way through night school. She's had a series of really pretty heinous male bosses, and she eventually is placed with this female boss, Catherine Harper, and she at first really enjoys working with her. She seems to really understand the struggles of being a woman in the business world. She makes an effort to befriend Tess, and it seems like everything is a great sort of symbiotic relationship. And then Tess discovers that Kate is actually trying to use one of the ideas that Tess had presented as her own. She's essentially stolen this brainchild that Tess has been working on for quite some time. Tess is then put in a situation where she is able to pose as an actual businesswoman as opposed to the secretary, and that just sort of snowballs into its own situation. And it ends up being a film that has a lot of like really funny moments, some seriously dramatic moments, a very nice romantic through line as well. And it's much more than it might seem on initial trailer viewing anyway. So this movie is 35 years old this year, and it is still almost embarrassingly relevant. Talking to a lot of women in the higher finance sector or women who are doing side hustles on Instagram, you still hear a lot of the same complaints and a lot of the same struggles that women in the 80s were having. Things are certainly better and have absolutely improved, especially in like a wider business practice approach to things, but it's still a world dominated by privilege, and that is, fraught with challenges, especially for young women who are trying to enter the industry. So, it's one of those films that even if it's almost 4 decades old, it still rings pretty true. And it's one of those where you absolutely can get behind the main heroine. You 100% root for Tess from the very get-go. It's got a fantastic cast. Tess is played by Melanie Griffith. Catherine Parker is played by Sigourney Weaver, and Tess's love interest, Harry Trask, is played by Harrison Ford. So the three of them have a really interesting chemistry going on. And what I think is most interesting is that while Catherine Parker is absolutely heinous, she's definitely someone who is preying upon a woman in a difficult situation, who people would automatically think less of simply because she's in the position of an assistant and she doesn't come from, some Ivy League hall or, prep school, and she doesn't have the network. you still almost understand how Parker's character could get to where she is. She has come from privilege. She has very clearly had all of the stepping stones that she could in order to get to a high executive position. But she's still a woman in that particular world, and she's still looked at in a different way than, say, someone who is male in that world. So it definitely has a lot of layers, considering I think it's just, marketed, especially at the time, as this romantic comedy. um, there are definitely some slightly dated situations and scenarios, but like I said, for the most part, it's still a very, very relevant story. Besides the three main actors, who are all, of course, really big celebrities, you also have cameos from Alec Baldwin, Joan Cusack, who is fantastic as Tess's best friend, a fellow assistant. You have a really interesting. So I will say that a lot of the minor male businessman characters are pretty flat, isn't quite the word, but pretty one dimensional. They are somewhat parodies almost of what you would expect to find in the industry today. But I have no doubts that in the 80s, a lot of the behaviors would definitely have been quite similar to these, and a lot of the attitudes. So that would be the only place that I think you might find a little bit of disconnect. In addition to the fact that you are playing for laughs, you are definitely trying to put Tess in situations that are outrageous. So, you know, it's not like a biopic would be, or something that's like a heavy drama. You still have those moments of levity, and at times it is the direct result of a somewhat less complex character dynamic. But for the most part, especially between the three main characters and between Tess and Trask in particular, you do have a lot of nuance, and you do have a lot of, you know, backstory that has to be delved into, how they get to where they are, why they react to things a certain way. And it's interesting to watch this in 2023, and to pick out the things that would definitely not be happening today and would very easily be happening today. I haven't watched this movie in years. I do remember watching it when I was a teenager. I do remember, really liking it, and definitely focusing more on the romantic comedy element of things rather than, the actual social structure, and the elements of real world practice. But it's interesting to watch and have my eye view those things and see what kind of lens that brings out. Um, so yeah, if you are looking for a really solid film, because overall it's just an enjoyable movie that has elements of comedy, drama, romance, featuring really, really excellent performances, make sure you check out 1988's Working Girl. Again, you can get this on both DVD and Blu-ray via our CleveNet service. Okay, our other film for this week is available on Hoopla Digital, and that is 2014's Apple Mortgage Cake. Now, this film is based on a true story, but I had never heard of this before, and I am a little bit embarrassed because I actually texted a friend uh, to find out, like, was this a big thing? And it absolutely was. It was all over the morning shows. I don't know. I missed it. And it's actually a really, really fascinating story, the real life element, but the movie itself was quite entertaining, and I was not expecting it. I did not watch this with the intention of recommending it for one of this month's movies. I watched it because I read the storyline and I was like, that sounds interesting. So in Apple Mortgage Cake, we are again in a film based on a true story, and it follows a young woman named Angela Logan. She's a single mother and she has three teenage boys. She is unfortunately kind of on the brink financially. She's about to lose her home. She is trying desperately to get a job, to make extra money. She's doing all the right things, and she's doing it with as much determination as humanly possible. She's optimistic. She doesn't give up, but she just can't catch a break. And what this movie does so well is it forces us to really think about those kinds of situations, because this woman's story is so many people's stories where you do everything that you possibly can and you just end up in a bad situation, and the fates just were aligned just right so that even though, she was not able to get the right kinds of assistance, she just couldn't seem to catch a break financially. She figured out a way to turn things around for herself. And even then, it wasn't just about her skills and her determination. So many other elements just had to fall into place just perfectly. Like, the basic kindness of strangers, because that was a massive, massive role in her ability to turn things around. Um, the perfect tone with sort of spreading word of mouth, social media, things like that. If any one of those elements had not landed just right, this story wouldn't have existed. So Angela is also a home baker. She knows how to bake, and she loves baking, and it sort of comforts her, and it's one of those things that she leans in when she's really, really troubled. And she ends up coming up with this idea to bake her way out of this situation, which again is a great idea in theory. And, it worked for her, but only because she got very, very lucky that certain people found out about it and the word of mouth was just right, because not everyone can get that situation to turn the way she did. The movie also does a great job of illustrating like little roadblocks. So, of course, like I was saying, she's got this very lucky situation where she was able to find this thing that she was good at and turn it into an industry that saved her. But she still hit roadblocks with, if she's even like, what permits does she need and how can she commercially handle this situation? Any of which, any of those elements could have totally spelled disaster for the situation if they hadn't, again, been worked out just right. So in real life, she was given a space to bake in because, as mentioned, she didn't have the ability to work out of her house once uh, the right people found out she was baking out of her home and making this money in order to sort of um, help her situation. Even that road was shut down to her as well. So someone was kind enough to offer her space to bake in, like a commercial space, so she could continue doing what she was doing. Not everyone gets that sort of good Samaritan who's willing to do that. She was picked up on CNN, on MSNBC, The Today Show, tons of other media outlets. And every time her story got shared, more people were interested in, what is this apple mortgage cake? How can I help her out? And it's like, it essentially became a global GoFundMe, but with cake. So it's one of those stories that is absolutely uplifting, and I found myself really enjoying it while I was watching it. But at the same time, I had this very healthy level of skepticism as to, like, this worked for her, but it's 100% not going to work for everyone. So it's frustrating too. It's one of those things where, a lot of things have to collide just right. And, I think it's important, that element of skepticism when watching these stories, because not everyone is going to be Angela Logan. And I think that's one of those things that I liked the most about this, is that it did make me think about that element of things. Like, I had a good time while watching it. I felt good about it. I felt happy for her, and I felt like this is super entertaining. Plus, it's an enjoyable movie. But it also made me think about, being conscious of other people's situations who might be in a similar rough spot. So if you are looking for something that has a little bit of fluff, that is, inspiring, that 100% will make you hungry and want an apple cake, because I absolutely did. I don't even like apple cake, but I wanted a piece. Um, that has really solid acting, because the cast was really great, uh, that will still make you think, make sure you check out Apple Mortgage Cake. It's again available on Hoopla and a fantastic film. Okay, so those were my two recommendations for films about women in the business world this week. If you have any recommendations for women in business films, make sure you comment with those below. Definitely am interested in watching more. There are a ton more available on our streaming platforms, as well as, of course, through our CleveNet service. If you have any recommendations for themes you'd like to see us cover in the future, definitely include those in your comments. I'm always looking for help with that. As always, thank you so much for joining me this week. I love putting these lists together, and March is one of my favorite months because I do love films focused on women, made by women, directed by them. And hopefully next week will be just as interesting and entertaining. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out this episode. Again, thanks for joining me, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.